Chapter 1. The girl no one would touch. Rain came down like a curtain of iron, cold and unforgiving, turning the cobblestones of Ashford's old quarter into mirrors of black glass. Elara Thorne pulled her cloak tighter, the wool already soaked through, and quickened her pace through streets that had emptied the moment. The sun disappeared behind the cathedral's broken spire. She shouldn't have stayed at the bookshop so late. Mr. Halstead had warned her the old quarter wasn't safe after dark anymore. Not since the houses had started their war, but the shop's warmth, the smell of old leather and ink, had been preferable to returning to her boarding house, where Mrs. Calloway would purse her lips and whisper to the other tenants, "That's the Thorne girl. Yes, the one, jilted at the altar. Poor thing, quite ruined really." Elara's jaw tightened. She'd rather face the rain. The alley between Crescent Street and the river docks was a shortcut she'd taken 100 times. Tonight, it felt different. The darkness breathed wrong, moved wrong. She could hear her own heartbeat, too loud in the silence between the rain. Then she heard the other sound, footsteps. 3 sets, maybe 4, matching her rhythm to precisely to be coincidence. Elara's hand went to the small knife in her pocket, a laughable defense, but it was all she had. She walked faster, not running yet, not giving them the satisfaction of knowing she was afraid. "Lost, sweetheart?" The voice came from behind, male and mocking. She didn't turn. The docks were just ahead. There would be lights, people, safety. A hand clamped onto her shoulder and spun her around. 3 men, young, well-dressed beneath their rain-soaked coats. Merchants' sons probably, or minor gentry looking for sport in the dark corners of the city. The one who'd grabbed her smiled, showing too many teeth. "Let me go." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Why would we do that?" The second man circled to her left, cutting off her escape route. "We've been watching you, Miss Thorne, all alone. No one waiting for you. No one to care if you don't make it home." The third man laughed. "I heard Thomas Ashford wouldn't have you. Said you were cold as a corpse in bed. Maybe we should test that theory." Rage flashed through her fear. She yanked her arm free and pulled the knife, small and pathetic though it was. "Touch me again and I'll cut you." The first man's smile widened. He took a step forward and then he wasn't there anymore. It happened so fast Elara's mind couldn't track it. One moment the man was reaching for her. The next he was 20 feet away, crumpled against the alley wall like a broken doll. The sound of impact echoed wetly in the rain. The other 2 men froze. A figure stood where the first man had been, tall and unnaturally still. The rain seemed to bend around him, sliding off an invisible barrier. In the dim light from the distant street lamps, Elara could make out a long, dark coat, black hair pushed back from a face of such severe beauty it looked carved from marble, and his eyes, even in the darkness, they gleamed like polished silver. "Leave." The single word carried the weight of absolute command. The second man grabbed his companion's arm and ran. Their footsteps faded into the night, leaving only the sound of rain and Elara's ragged breathing. She should run too. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she couldn't move. The stranger turned those silver eyes on her, and she felt the weight of his gaze, like a physical thing, pressing against her chest, stealing her breath. "You're bleeding." His voice was different now, softer, though something hungry stirred beneath the words. Elara looked down. In the struggle, one of the men must have cut her palm when she'd drawn her knife. Blood welled from a thin line across her skin, black in the darkness, dripping onto the wet stones. The stranger took a step toward her, then stopped abruptly, as if he'd hit an invisible wall. His jaw clenched, and for a moment something almost like pain crossed his features. "You need to leave this district," he said, his voice strained. "Now, the scent of your blood, it will draw others." "Others?" The word came out as barely a whisper. He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her feel like a specimen under glass. "You don't know what's happening in your city, do you? You walk through the old quarter at night as if the world hasn't changed. I know about the disappearances. Everyone knew. 17 people missing in the last month. The magistrates blamed rival gangs, revolutionaries, foreign agents. Everyone had a theory. No one had proof. I know people are afraid. They should be." He took another step, closer now, his movements fluid and precise. "Not quite human. The ceasefire between the houses has broken. We're at war. And you," his gaze dropped to her bleeding hand. "You're caught in the middle of it." "We?" The word registered slowly through her shock. "We're at war." "What are you?" She breathed, The stranger smiled, and it was the saddest thing Alara had ever seen. Beautiful and terrible, and utterly devoid of warmth. What am I? He reached out, his pale fingers hovering just above her wounded hand, not quite touching. I'm the monster your mother warned you about, Miss Thorne. I'm the reason children don't play in the old quarter after dark anymore. I'm the thing that hunts in the spaces between your heartbeats. He leaned in close enough that she could feel the absence of warmth radiating from his skin. Close enough to see that his chest didn't rise and fall with breath. I'm a vampire, he whispered. And you just became my responsibility. The world tilted. Alara's knees buckled. The last thing she felt before the darkness took her was his arms catching her fall, cold as winter stone and impossibly gentle. Chapter 2. The Sanctuary of Shadows. Alara woke to the smell of old books and candle wax. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was still at Halstead's shop, that she'd fallen asleep among the stacks again. But the ceiling above her was wrong, vaulted stone instead of wooden beams, disappearing into shadows that candlelight couldn't reach. She sat up too quickly. Her head spun, and a hand steadied her shoulder. Slowly, that voice again, smooth as dark velvet. You fainted. Your body is still recovering from the shock. The vampire.id all rushed back the alley. The attack, those silver eyes watching her bleed. Alara jerked away from his touch, scrambling backward on what she now realized was an enormous four-poster bed draped in deep crimson fabric. Her hand went instinctively to her throat. He stood at the bedside, arms crossed, watching her with an expression that might have been amusement. If I wanted to kill you, Miss Thorne, you wouldn't have woken up. Where am I? Her voice came out hoarse. Somewhere safe. He moved to a table near the window. Tall windows, she noted, but covered with heavy curtains that looked like they hadn't been opened in years. He poured something from a crystal decanter into a glass. Drink this. It will help with the dizziness. I'm not drinking anything you give me. It's water. He set the glass on the nightstand beside the bed, maintaining a careful distance. Though I admire your caution, it's more than most of your kind show when they wander into our territories. Alara forced herself to study him properly, now that she was conscious. He was tall, well over 6 feet, dressed in clothes that looked expensive but slightly out of fashion, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark trousers, no coat. His hair was black as ink, falling just past his collar, and his face. She looked away. It was too much, that face. Too perfect to be real. You said I was your responsibility now. She kept her voice steady. What does that mean? He was silent for a long moment, standing perfectly still in that unnatural way of his. No fidgeting, no shifting weight, no breathing. It means, he said finally, that you were attacked in my district. Under the old laws, the laws that govern the houses, your blood was spilled on my territory. That makes you mine to protect until the debt is satisfied. I don't understand. No, I don't imagine you do. He turned to face the curtained window, his profile sharp in the candlelight. Your human authorities tell you there are disappearances, gang violence. They're half right. There are 4 vampire houses in Ashford, Miss Thorne. For a century, we've maintained a careful balance. We feed, but we don't kill. We take from the willing, the desperate, those who seek us out. In exchange, we police our own and keep the peace. But something changed. House Corvus broke the accord. His jaw tightened. They've been taking humans by force, draining them, leaving bodies in the river. The other houses demanded justice. Corvus refused. Now we're at war, and humans are caught in the crossfire. Alara's mind raced, trying to reconcile everything she thought she knew about the world with what he was telling her. Vampires, houses, ancient laws. It sounded like something from the Gothic novels Mrs. Halstead kept on the restricted shelves, except she'd seen him move. Seen him throw a grown man 20 feet with no visible effort. Seen his eyes gleam like polished silver in the dark. Those men who attacked me were human. Hired by House Corvus to create chaos in my district. They wanted to draw me out, make me break cover. He glanced at her, and something flickered in those strange eyes. They didn't expect you to fight back. Neither did I. There was almost approval in his voice. You still haven't told me your name, Alara said. No, I haven't. He moved away from the window, prowling the room's perimeter like a caged wolf. Names have power, Miss Thorne, especially among my kind. To give you my name would be to give you a measure of control over me. You know mine. I know many things about you. He stopped, meeting her gaze directly. I know you were engaged to Thomas Ashford. I know. He called off the wedding 3 weeks before the ceremony. I know you work at Halstead's bookshop for barely enough coin to pay for your boarding house room. I know you're alone in this city, with no family and few friends. Alara felt her face flush with humiliation and anger. You've been watching me. I've been watching everyone in the old quarter since the war began. It's my duty. He picked up the glass of water, offering it again. You're dehydrated. Please drink. I can hear your heartbeat straining. This time, she took the glass. Their fingers didn't touch. He was careful about that, but she felt the cold radiating from his skin. She drank, and the water was clean and cool and exactly what her body needed. Why did you save me? She asked when the glass was empty. The vampire was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, almost contemplative. Because you reminded me of someone. Someone I failed to save, a very long time ago. He turned away, shadows pooling around him. And because you were brave, foolish, but brave. I find I have little patience for cruelty these days, even among humans. How long? Alara asked. How long have you been? What you are? 243 years. He said it matter-of-factly, as if he were giving the time of day. I was 28 when I was turned. I've been 28 ever since. 243 years. The number was incomprehensible. You can call me Kieran, he said finally, still facing away from her. It's not my full name, but it will suffice. And you should rest, Alara Thorne, because come nightfall, we have work to do. What work? He looked back over his shoulder, and his smile was sharp as a blade, finding out why House Corvus wanted you dead. Chapter 3. The truth in shadow. Alara didn't rest. How could she, knowing what prowled beyond those heavy curtains? She explored the room instead, moving quietly, though she suspected Kieran could hear every footstep, every breath. The chamber was vast, filled with furniture that spoke of old wealth-carved mahogany wardrobes, velvet chairs worn smooth by centuries of use, shelves lined with books in languages she couldn't read. No mirrors, she noted. That part of the legends, at least, seemed true. A door in the corner led to a washroom with a copper tub and porcelain fixtures that looked ancient but functional. She found clean towels, soap that smelled of lavender, even a brush and comb, laid out as if someone had prepared for her arrival. Had Kieran done that? The thought unsettled her more than the idea of being trapped with a vampire. She cleaned the cut on her palm. It had already stopped bleeding, and washed the rain from her face and hair as best she could. Her dress was ruined, the hem caked with mud, but there was nothing to be done about that. When she returned to the bedroom, she found a tray on the table that hadn't been there before. Bread, cheese, cold meat, and a small pot of tea still steaming. Kieran stood by the window, motionless as a statue. You need to eat, he said, without turning. Humans are remarkably fragile when they forget to maintain themselves. Alara's stomach betrayed her with a growl. She hadn't eaten since morning. She sat at the table eyeing the food suspiciously. It's not poisoned, Kieran said, and this time she heard the amusement in his voice. I went to considerable trouble to acquire it. The least you could do is not let it go to waste. She took a bite of bread. It was good fresh, probably from one of the bakeries near the market square. You can't eat this yourself. No? Food tastes like ash to me now. I remember the flavor of bread, of wine, of roasted meat. But the memory is distant, like something that happened to someone else. He turned from the window, his silver eyes finding hers across the room. Do you know what I miss most? Coffee. The smell of it brewing in the morning. I used to drink it black, bitter enough to wake the dead. There was something achingly human in his voice, and it caught Alara off guard. What did you do? She asked. Before you were turned? I was a soldier, a lieutenant in the king's army during the border wars. He moved closer, but stopped several feet from the table, maintaining that careful distance. I died on a battlefield, or thought I did. When I woke 3 days later in a mass grave, everything had changed. My maker found me there, clawing my way out of the earth, and gave me a choice: join House Valeni, or face the sun. House Valeni. That's your house? I lead it now. He said it without pride or pleasure. The previous lord fell to Corvus assassins 6 months ago. The title passed to me, along with all its burdens. I never wanted to rule, but the house needed strength, and I was the oldest survivor. Alara sipped her tea, processing this. You said House Corvus wanted me dead. Why? I'm nobody. I have nothing they could want. That, Kieran said, settling into the chair across from her with inhuman grace, is what I intend to discover. Those men knew your name, Knew your route. They were waiting for you specifically. Someone told them where to find you. A chill ran down her spine. But who would? She stopped. A terrible thought forming. Thomas. Kieran's expression didn't change, but she sensed his attention sharpen. Your former fiancé. Tell me about him. There's not much to tell. The words tasted bitter. We were engaged for 6 months. He seemed kind, attentive. His family approved of the match. I had no fortune, but my father had been a respected physician before he died. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, Thomas called it off, said he'd made a mistake, that we weren't suited. And you believed him? What else could I believe? She set down her teacup with more force than intended. He wouldn't see me, wouldn't answer my letters. His family made it clear I was no longer welcome. I became a cautionary tale, the girl who couldn't keep her man. Kieran was silent for a moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Thomas Ashford is the third son of Marcus Ashford, who sits on the city council. Marcus has been vocal about the disappearances, pushing for a curfew in the old quarter. Very vocal. You think he knows about the houses? I think he's being paid by House Corvus to look the other way. Kieran's voice hardened. And I think your engagement to his son became inconvenient. Tell me, did Thomas ever take you to his family estate? Elara frowned, trying to remember. Once, for dinner. It was strange they kept me in the front parlors, wouldn't let me see the rest of the house. Thomas said his mother was redecorating. The Ashford estate borders Corvus territory. If they're using it as a way station, moving captured humans through, Kieran stood abruptly, pacing. You would have had access to the house as Thomas's wife. You would have seen things, asked questions. Understanding dawned, cold and terrible. They broke the engagement to protect their secret, and when that wasn't enough, when you stayed in the old quarter instead of leaving the city in shame, as they expected, they decided to eliminate the risk permanently. Kieran's hands clenched into fists. They used human killers so it wouldn't violate the accords. No vampire touched you. They could claim ignorance. Elara's breath came short. All of it, the humiliation, the whispers, the loneliness had been orchestrated. She'd been marked for death, and she'd never even known. What do we do? Her voice was steadier than she felt. Kieran looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps. Or recognition. We prove it, he said. We find evidence that the Ashfords are colluding with Corvus. And then, his smile was cold and sharp. Then I bring it before the Night Court, and House Corvus answers for breaking every law we hold sacred. And me? You stay here. Stay safe. Elara stood, meeting his gaze. No, they tried to kill me. They ruined my life. I want to help. It's too dangerous. I'm already in danger. She lifted her chin. You said it yourself. I'm your responsibility. So let me be useful. Kieran studied her for a long moment, and Elara had the distinct impression she was being measured against some internal standard. Finally, he nodded. Then you should know what you're agreeing to. Come nightfall, we visit the Ashford estate. And if we're caught, Miss Thorne, they will kill us both. I understand. I don't think you do. He moved closer, and she could see the predator lurking beneath his careful control. But you will. Chapter 4. Lessons in the dark. The hours until nightfall stretched like years. Kieran disappeared after their conversation, leaving Elara alone with her thoughts and the oppressive silence of the ancient house. She tried the door unlocked, surprisingly, and found herself in a corridor of polished stone that seemed to extend forever in both directions. Candles burned in iron sconces, their flames never flickering. Despite the drafts that whispered through the halls, she walked for what felt like miles, finding locked doors, empty rooms, and once, a vast library that made Halstead's shop look like a closet. The books here were old, bound in leather, and stranger materials she didn't want to examine too closely. Some of the titles were in English: The Covenant of Houses, Blood Law and its Applications, The Turning, Ethics and Consequences, A Vampire's Education, laid out in gilt lettering and aging paper. You shouldn't wander alone, Elara spun. Kieran stood in the doorway, though she hadn't heard him approach. He'd changed clothes, a dark coat now, fitted and formal, making him look like a portrait stepped out of its frame. I didn't know I was a prisoner, she said. You're not. But this house is old, and not all its inhabitants are as restrained as I am. He moved into the library, his fingers trailing along the spines of books with something like affection. House Valenti has existed for 300 years. Many of my brothers and sisters sleep in the catacombs below. They don't wake often, but when they do, they're hungry. And they don't always distinguish between guest and prey. The casual way he said it made her stomach turn. You're trying to frighten me. I'm trying to keep you alive. He pulled a slim volume from the shelf and held it out. If we're doing this together, you need to understand what you're dealing with. Read. Alara took the book. The cover read, A Human's Guide to Vampire Society. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. That was written 80 years ago by a human scholar we allowed into our world, Kieran explained. She spent 5 years studying our laws, our customs. It's dated, but the fundamentals remain true. Alara opened to a random page. Chapter 7 The Ethics of Feeding. Vampires require blood to survive, she read aloud. But the method of acquisition is governed by strict protocols. Feeding without consent is punishable by final death. Killing a human through feeding is likewise forbidden, unless sanctioned by the Night Court in cases of grievous crime. She looked up. You actually have laws about this? Did you think we were mindless monsters? Kieran's voice carried an edge. We've had centuries to build civilization, Miss Thorne. We're not animals. We're apex predators who learned that extinction follows excess. He gestured to the book. Keep reading. The section on blood oaths is particularly relevant. She found the chapter, skimming quickly. The language was formal, almost legal. A blood oath is the most sacred contract between vampire and human. Once sworn, the vampire becomes bound to protect the human unto final death. The human, in turn, may offer blood freely without coercion. The bond can only be broken by mutual consent, or the death of either party. Is that what you want from me? The words came out sharper than intended. A blood oath. My blood in exchange for protection? Kieran turned away, shadows pooling in the hollows of his face. No, I told you you're here because you were attacked on my territory. The old laws demand I protect you until the threat is eliminated. What happens after? He paused. That's your choice to make, but you're hungry. She said it with certainty, watching the tension in his shoulders. You haven't fed since you found me. I fed 2 nights ago. I can go a week before the hunger becomes difficult. And after a week, I become dangerous. He faced her again, and his eyes had taken on a faint red glow around the silver. The control I'm exercising now, the restraint it requires a full stomach and a clear mind. Starve us long enough, and we revert to instinct. That's what House Corvus is doing to their fledglings. Starving them, driving them mad, then setting them loose on human districts. Alara closed the book carefully. How do you usually feed? There are willing donors. Humans who seek us out, who find the experience pleasurable. We have arrangements. They come to designated houses. They're fed and paid, and everyone walks away satisfied. His mouth twisted. It's transactional, clean, safe, but not always enough. He was quiet for a long moment. No, not always. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Alara knew she should be terrified. She was trapped in a vampire's lair, discussing blood and hunger with a creature that could kill her in seconds. But instead, she felt something else, curiosity, and beneath that, a strange sense of kinship with this ancient, lonely thing wearing a man's face. Teach me, she said finally. Kieran's eyes narrowed. Teach you what? Everything. If I'm going to help you tonight, I need to know how to move in your world, how to recognize other vampires, what to do if we're discovered. She stepped closer, emboldened by his stillness. You said I was brave and foolish. Make me brave and informed instead. Something flickered across his features, surprise, perhaps, or reluctant admiration. You don't know what you're asking. Then explain it to me. He studied her for what felt like an eternity, and Alara forced herself not to look away. Finally, he nodded, a single sharp motion. Very well. Lesson 1. Vampires can be killed, but it's not easy. Decapitation works. Fire works. A stake through the heart will paralyze us, but won't kill unless the head is removed. He began to pace, his movements fluid and predatory. Sunlight is fatal. We burn fast, usually within seconds of exposure. Running water weakens us, but won't kill. Garlic, crosses, holy water, all myths. And mirrors? We cast reflections. We simply prefer not to see them. His voice went flat. It's unsettling, watching yourself not breathe. Alara absorbed this, her mind cataloging facts like she was studying for an examination. What else? We're faster than humans, stronger. Our senses are sharper. I can hear your heartbeat from across the room. Smell the lavender soap you used. See in darkness as clearly as you see in daylight. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see her reflection in his silver eyes. We can also compel weak-minded humans to obey us. You'll need to learn to resist. How? Focus, mental discipline. And most importantly, his hand moved, faster than she could track, and suddenly his fingers were pressed lightly against her temple. Never look directly into a vampire's eyes when they're trying to influence you. Alar's breath caught. His touch was ice cold, and yet she felt heat spreading from the point of contact, racing through her veins like whiskey. You're stronger than most, Kieran murmured, studying her face with clinical intensity. I can feel your mind pushing back. Good, hold on to that. He withdrew his hand, and the absence of his touch felt like a loss. Lesson 2, he said, his voice rougher now. Never trust a vampire who promises not to hurt you. We're all dangerous, Miss Thorne. Even me. Especially me. Noted, Alara said, though her voice shook slightly. What's lesson 3? Kieran smiled, and it was sharp and sad and beautiful. Lesson 3. Once you enter our world, you can never truly leave it. Are you certain this is what you want? Alara thought of Thomas, of the Ashfords, of the casual cruelty with which they'd destroyed her life to hide their secrets. She thought of 17 missing people, of a war fought in shadows while humans slept unaware. I'm certain, she said. Then we begin. Kieran moved to the library door. Come. The sun is setting. It's time to teach you how to break into a house without being caught. Chapter 5. Into the wolf's den. The Ashford estate rose against the night sky like a monument to old money and older secrets. Alara had been here before, smiled politely in its parlors, accepted lukewarm tea from servants who wouldn't meet her eyes. Now, crouched behind the garden wall, with Kieran beside her, the house looked different, menacing. The servants' entrance is on the east side, she whispered. There's usually only one footman on duty after 10. Kieran's hand touched her shoulder, a brief, cold pressure. Not tonight. Look. She followed his gaze. 6 men patrolled the grounds, all armed, moving with the coordination of trained soldiers. Lanterns burned in windows that should have been dark. They're expecting trouble, Kieran murmured. Or hiding something worth protecting. Can you do that thing? Move faster than they can see. If I carry you, yes. But it will be unpleasant. Humans aren't built for that kind of speed. He turned to face her, his expression serious. You'll need to trust me completely. Can you do that? Alara's heart hammered. Everything in her screamed that trusting a vampire was madness. But she'd come this far. Yes. Then hold on. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her against his chest with inhuman strength. She barely had time to grab his coat before the world exploded into motion. The sensation was like being underwater and falling simultaneously, pressure crushing her lungs. The world reduced to a blur of darkness and speed. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only hold on as Kieran moved through the shadows like smoke. Then it stopped. They were inside a storage room, judging by the shelves of linens and cleaning supplies. Alara stumbled, gasping, and Kieran steadied her with hands that were gentle despite their strength. Breathe slowly, he instructed. Your body needs to adjust. It took a full minute before her vision cleared and her stomach stopped churning. When she finally looked at him, he was watching her with concern that seemed almost human. I'm fine, she managed. Just give me a moment. We don't have moments. Those guards will do a sweep in 10 minutes. He moved to the door, listening. The house is different from your last visit. There are reinforced locks on the interior doors. Wards against vampire entry on several rooms. Can you sense them? The wards? I can feel them like a wall of static. Old magic, probably purchased from a witch. His mouth twisted in distaste. The Ashfords are more connected than I thought. Alara forced herself to focus past the lingering nausea. When I was here before, Thomas kept steering me away from the West Wing. Said it was being renovated. But I heard sounds, voices, maybe crying. Kieran's eyes flashed red for an instant. Show me. They moved through the house like ghosts, Alara leading. Kieran, a silent shadow at her back. The corridors were exactly as she remembered: expensive wallpaper, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, thick carpets that absorbed sound. But now she noticed other things: doors with new locks, windows with iron bars, the faint smell of something chemical and wrong. The West Wing was locked as expected. Kieran examined the door with a professional's eye. Silver inlay in the wood. They really don't want vampires getting in. He tested the handle carefully. I could break it, but we'd lose the element of surprise. Wait, Alara knelt, examining the lock. This is the same type as the bookshop uses. Mr. Halstead showed me how to pick it once when he locked himself out. She pulled 2 pins from her hair, the only things she'd had time to grab from her boarding house. I might be able to. The lock was stiff, resistant, but after several agonizing minutes, she felt the mechanism give. The door swung open silently. Kieran looked at her with something like respect. You continue to surprise me, Miss Thorne. Beyond the door, a staircase descended into darkness. The chemical smell was stronger here, mixed with something else, copper and rot and fear. Blood, Kieran said quietly, his voice carrying an edge of barely controlled rage. Recent. At least a dozen humans, maybe more. They descended, Alara's hand, finding Kieran's coat in the darkness. She couldn't see, but she could feel him moving with absolute certainty, navigating the shadows like they were his natural habitat. The basement was vast, subdivided into rooms with iron doors. Kieran moved to the first one, peering through the small barred window. Empty, recently cleaned. He tried the next. Same here. But the third door was different. Kieran froze, his entire body going rigid. What is it? Alara whispered. Someone's alive in there. I can hear her heartbeat. He gripped the door handle, and Alara heard metal groan under the pressure. The lock is silver reinforced. I'll need a moment, let me. Alara pushed past him, working her pins into the mechanism. This lock was more complex, but fear and adrenaline made her fingers swift. The tumblers clicked. Inside, a girl huddled in the corner, maybe 17, her dress torn and filthy. When the lantern light hit her face, she screamed, Please, no more. Please, we're not going to hurt you. Alara moved slowly, hands raised. We're here to help. What's your name? Sarah. The girl's voice cracked. Sarah Pemberton. They took me 3 weeks ago. Said I'd seen too much at the docks, that I needed to disappear. What did you see? Men loading boxes onto carriages. Large boxes, heavy, and inside, Sarah's eyes went distant with horror. I heard them moving, heard them crying. Kieran stepped into the cell, and Sarah shrank back until she saw his face properly. Recognition flashed across her features. You're him. The vampire lord from the old quarter. Thomas said you were the enemy, but she grabbed Alara's hand. He's the one doing this. Thomas Ashford. He's working with the Corvus vampires, helping them smuggle humans out of the city. They're using this house as a way station. Alara's blood went cold. Where are they taking them? I don't know, but more arrived tonight. I heard the guards talking a shipment of 20, coming from the warehouse district. Kieran and Alara exchanged glances. 20 more victims. 20 more people who would disappear into whatever hell the Ashfords and House Corvus had created. Can you walk? Kieran asked Sarah, his voice surprisingly gentle. I think so. Good. We're getting you out of here. He turned to Alara. There's a servant's door that leads to the east garden. I can get her over the wall, find her somewhere safe, and the shipment? Alara interrupted. We can't just let them take 20 more people. We can't stop them alone. I need to bring this before the night court. Get the other houses involved. That will take time we don't have. Alara's mind raced. If we could intercept them at the warehouse, find proof of what they're doing, it's too dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. She met his silver eyes directly, refusing to be cowed. You wanted my help. This is me helping. Kieran looked like he wanted to argue, but footsteps echoed in the corridor above. Voices. The guards had found the open door. We're out of time, he said tersely. He scooped Sarah into his arms like she weighed nothing. Hold on to me, Miss Thorne. Both of you. This is going to be worse than last time. Alara grabbed his coat just as the basement door burst open and lantern light flooded the stairs. There. Stop them. Kieran moved. The world dissolved into screaming speed and darkness. Sarah's terrified gasps mixing with the thunder of Alara's own heartbeat. She felt them burst through a window glass shattering, cold air rushing past, and then they were falling, landing hard in the garden as gunshots cracked behind them. Kieran didn't stop. He ran, carrying them both, faster than thought, until the Ashford estate was just a glow of lanterns in the distance, and they were safe in the shadows of the old quarter once more. When he finally set them down, Alara collapsed to her knees, retching. The warehouse. She gasped when she could speak. We have to stop them. Kieran looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. You're either very brave or very foolish, Alara Thorne. I haven't decided which. Can I be both? Despite everything, He smiled. Come, if we're doing this, we do it right. Chapter 6. Blood and Revelationth Warehouse District squatted at the edge of the river like a collection of broken teeth. Elara had never been here after dark. No sensible person ventured into this maze of rotting wood and rusted iron once the longshoreman went home. Now, pressed against Kieran's side in the shadow of an abandoned grain silo, she understood why. The air itself felt wrong, thick, predatory. 3 vampires, Kieran murmured, his voice barely audible. Corvus by their scent. Young, probably 50 years or less. Dangerous but inexperienced. Elara followed his gaze to the warehouse across the street. Light leaked through cracks in the walls, and she could hear voices, some human, some carrying that strange, cold quality she'd learned to associate with vampires. And the humans? At least a dozen inside the building, terrified. I can smell their fear from here. His jaw clenched. We're too late to stop the collection. They're already here. Then we free them. Against 3 vampires and however many human guards they've brought. Kieran turned to look at her, and his eyes glowed red in the darkness. I'm strong, Miss Thorne, but I'm not invincible. If they have silver weapons, if they coordinate properly, you're afraid. The realization surprised her. I'm 243 years old. I've survived this long by not being reckless. But even as he said it, she saw conflict warring in his expression. Those people in there, if we fail, if we die, no one else knows what's happening. The Ashfords win. Corvus wins. Elara thought of Sarah Pemberton cowering in that cell. Of 17 people already missing. Of the 20 more who would disappear tonight if they did nothing. Then we don't fail, she said simply. Kieran stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he laughed, a soft, bitter sound that held equal parts admiration and despair. You're going to get us both killed. He reached into his coat, pulling out a knife with a wickedly curved blade. But I find I don't care. Here, silver-plated. If a vampire gets too close, go for the throat or the heart. The knife was heavier than she expected. I've never stabbed anyone before. Hopefully, you won't need to. He drew a second blade for himself, testing its weight. I'll handle the vampires. You focus on getting the humans out. There's a loading dock on the north side. The doors should be unlocked. Once you free them, send them toward the old quarter. My people will find them. What about you? I'll be right behind you. He said it with confidence, but Elara caught the lie in his voice. He didn't expect to survive this. Before she could protest, Kieran touched her cheek, a brief, cold gesture that sent electricity racing down her spine. Thank you, Elara Thorne, for reminding me what it means to care about something beyond survival. Then he was gone. Moving through the shadows toward the warehouse entrance, Elara forced herself to move, circling toward the loading dock on trembling legs. The knife felt like a promise and a threat in her hand. She'd never been brave, not really. She'd been quiet, obedient Elara, who did what she was told and never made waves. But that Elara had died the night Thomas broke their engagement. This Elara was something else. Something forged in humiliation and anger and the desperate need to matter. She reached the loading dock just as the screaming started inside. The doors were locked, but the wood was old and rotten. Elara threw her shoulder against them once, twice, and on the third impact they burst inward. Splinters flying. Inside was chaos. Humans huddled in cages along the walls, men, women, even children, all staring at her with eyes that had given up hope. In the center of the warehouse, Kieran fought 2 vampires with a speed and ferocity that stole her breath. Blood sprayed across the concrete floor, black vampire blood, mixing with red human blood. A guard rushed at Elara, cudgel raised. She ducked on instinct, felt the weapon whistle past her ear, and drove her knife upward into his stomach. The blade met resistance, then punched through. The guard's eyes went wide with shock. Elara yanked the knife free and pushed him away, fighting the urge to vomit. The keys. She shouted at the captives. Where are the keys? A young man pointed with a shaking hand. Office. Corner wall. Elara ran, her boots slipping in blood. Behind her, she heard Kieran roar, an inhuman sound that raised every hair on her body. She didn't look back. Couldn't. If she saw him fall, she'd freeze, and people would die. The office was a disaster of papers and ledgers. She found the keys hanging on a hook beside a shipping manifest. Her eyes caught on the names listed. There's 17 names she recognized from the missing persons reports. Proof. This was proof. She grabbed the manifest and ran back to the cages, fumbling with keys until she found the right ones. The locks clicked open, and the captives surged out, stumbling. crying, running for the loading dock doors. Go, Alara shouted. Old quarter, run and don't stop. They fled into the night, a stream of broken humanity, finding freedom, but the third vampire had found her. He was young, like Kieran had said, with the wild eyes of something starved. His fangs were fully extended, black blood dripping from a wound in his shoulder where Kieran had cut him. Little human, he hissed, stalking toward her. You've ruined everything. I think I'll make your death slow. Alara raised her knife, but her hand shook. This wasn't a human guard, this was a predator that had survived 50 years of hunting. She was going to die. Then Kieran was there, appearing between them like a wall of fury. But he was wounded to his coat torn, blood soaking through his shirt. Too much blood. Run, he told Alara without looking back. Get the manifest to House Valeni. Tell them everything. I'm not leaving you, go. The Corvus vampire lunged. Kieran met him mid-leap, and they crashed into a support beam with enough force to crack the wood. The warehouse groaned, dust raining from the rafters. Alara saw it happening in slow motion, the beam breaking. The ceiling beginning to collapse. Kieran still locked in combat with the Corvus vampire. Unable to escape. She didn't let herself think. She ran forward, grabbed Kieran's coat, and pulled with strength born of pure terror. He stumbled backward, away from the collapsing ceiling. And the Corvus vampire wasn't fast enough. The beam came down like the hand of God, crushing the vampire beneath tons of splintered wood and iron. His scream cut off abruptly. The warehouse shuddered, more ceiling panels falling. The two other Corvus vampires Kieran had been fighting were already dead or fled. Alara couldn't tell which. Now we run, Kieran gasped. Grabbing her hand, they ran through the loading dock doors as the warehouse collapsed behind them. The night air filled with the sounds of destruction and distant sirens. They ran until the docks were far behind. Until they reached the safety of the old quarter's twisting streets. Until Kieran finally stopped and collapsed against a wall, sliding to the ground. His wounds were terrible claw marks across his chest. A deep gash in his side that leaked too much blood. You need to feed, Alara said, kneeling beside him. To heal, you need blood. I'll find someone. Later, when I can move. His eyes were dimming, the red glow fading. Did you get the manifest? She held up the crumpled papers, still clutched in her blood-stained hand. I got it. Good, that's good. He closed his eyes. You saved my life, Alara Thorne, twice in one night. I'm starting to think you're dangerous, says the vampire. He smiled weakly. Then his hand found hers, cold fingers wrapping around her warm ones. Feed from me, Alara heard herself say. You're dying. I can see it. You need blood now, not later. Kieran's eyes snapped open. No, won't you? Said vampires need consent. I'm giving it. She moved closer, baring her throat. Please, let me save you this time. Alara. His voice was anguished. You don't know what you're offering. The intimacy of it. The bond it creates. I know enough. And I choose this. I choose you. For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Then his hand came up to cup her neck, gentle despite his fading strength. You're either very brave or very foolish, he whispered against her throat. I'm both, Alara replied. We established that. His fangs pierced her skin, and the world went white. Chapter 7. The price of blood. Pain bloomed at Alara's throat. Sharp and bright, but it lasted only a heartbeat before something else took its place. Warmth. Not the heat of fever or fire, but something deeper, more profound. It spread through her veins like liquid starlight, carrying with it sensations she had no words for. She could feel Kieran, not just his mouth against her skin or his hand cradling her neck, but him. His ancient loneliness. His carefully controlled hunger. His desperate fear that he would hurt her. And beneath it all, something she hadn't expected. Wonder. He was feeling what she felt. The connection flowing both ways, and he was amazed by her. This is what it means, she thought distantly. This is the bond. When Kieran finally pulled away, his eyes had gone completely silver, glowing in the darkness like twin moons. The wounds across his chest were already closing, skin knitting together with inhuman speed. He looked at her with an expression caught between reverence and horror. What have we done? He whispered. Alara touched her throat. The puncture wounds were small, already clotting. She felt dizzy, but not weak. Instead, there was a strange vitality humming through her body. As if Kieran had left something behind in exchange for what he'd taken. We survived, she said simply. It's more than that. Kieran rose to his feet with his usual fluid grace, pulling her up with him. His hands lingered on her arms, steadying her. I can feel you now. Your heartbeat, your emotions. It's faint, but it's there. A blood bond, even a weak one, creates a connection that doesn't easily break. Is that bad? He struggled for words. Complicated. I'll always know if you're in danger. I'll be drawn to protect you, even beyond what the laws demand. And you might feel echoes of me. Dreams, perhaps. Impressions. Alara processed this. She should be frightened, should feel violated. But instead, she felt oddly secure, as if she'd found something she hadn't known she was missing. Will it fade? With time and distance. Yes. Unless. Kieran looked away. Unless we reinforce it. Feed it. He didn't finish the thought, but Alara understood. Unless they chose to make it permanent. Unless they bound themselves together through repeated feedings, through choice and consent, until the bond became unbreakable. A blood oath. We should go, Kieran said abruptly, releasing her. The sun rises in 3 hours. I need to get you somewhere safe before dawn. And this manifest needs to reach House Valenti immediately. They moved through the old quarter in silence. Alara too overwhelmed to speak, Kieran too focused on their surroundings. She noticed things now that she hadn't before, the way he tensed when they passed certain streets, how his eyes constantly scanned the rooftops, the protective way he positioned himself between her and every shadow, the blood bond, she realized. It was already changing how he saw her. House Valenti's sanctuary was nothing like the Ashford estate, where that had been all pretension and cold elegance. This was fortress and home combined. The entrance was hidden behind a bookmaker's shop, downstairs that wound deep into the earth, opening into chambers carved from living stone. Vampires moved through the halls. Some nodded to Kieran with respect. Others watched Alara with undisguised curiosity. She felt their attention like pressure against her skin, predatory and assessing. Ignore them, Kieran murmured. You're under my protection. No one here will touch you. He led her to a council chamber where 5 vampires waited around a table of polished black wood. They were ancient, all of them. Alara could see it in the way they held themselves. The weight of centuries in their eyes. Lord Kieran, the woman at the head of the table, spoke, her voice carrying the accent of a language long dead. You return injured, and with a human bearing the mark of your feeding. This requires explanation. It requires action. Lady Morgaine. Kieran placed the blood-stained manifest on the table. House Corvus has been abducting humans with the help of the Ashford family, using the Ashford estate as a way station. They've taken 17 humans that we know of, and attempted to take 20 more tonight. The chamber erupted in cold, controlled fury. This violates every law of the Covenant, a male vampire snarled. The Accords explicitly forbid. I know what they forbid, Kieran interrupted. I also know we've been too slow to act. While we've debated and investigated, humans have died. House Valenti failed them. You speak out of turn. I speak the truth. Kieran's voice rang with authority. I claim right of testimony. This human, Alara Thorne, witnessed the abductions firsthand. She freed the captives. She risked her life to bring us proof. All eyes turned to Alara. She fought the urge to step backward, to flee from the weight of those ancient stairs. Is this true, human? Lady Morgaine asked, her tone softening slightly. You entered House Corvus's operations willingly? Yes. Alara's voice came out stronger than she felt. They tried to kill me because I would have discovered their secret as Thomas Ashford's wife. When I survived, they tried again. Lord Kieran saved me. Everything he says is true. Another vampire, younger looking, but no less dangerous, leaned forward. And you fed him, formed a blood bond. Why? Because he was dying. Alara met the vampire's gaze directly. Because he'd sacrificed himself to save humans he didn't know. Because it was the right thing to do. Silence fell across the chamber. Finally, Lady Morgaine stood. The manifest provides names, dates, routes. This is sufficient evidence to bring before the Night Court. She looked at Kieran. You've done well despite your unorthodox methods. House Valenti recognizes your service. What about the humans? Alara asked before she could stop herself. The ones still missing? Sarah Pemberton said more arrived tonight. Some might still be out there. The vampires exchanged glances. Lady Morgane's expression was unreadable. The Night Court convenes in 3 days, she said carefully. Until then, we must move cautiously. House Corvus is powerful, and the Ashfords have human authorities in their pocket. If we act too quickly, people will die, Alara interrupted. her fear forgotten in the face of cold political calculation. "You're talking about waiting while humans are tortured and killed. Mind your tongue, human," the younger vampire growled. "You address the council of House Valenti, let her speak." Kieran's hand found Alar's shoulder, a gesture of support and protection. "She's earned that right." Lady Morgaine studied Alara with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "You care deeply for your kind. That's admirable. But you don't understand the delicacy of vampire politics. If we move against House Corvus without proper sanction from the Night Court, we risk open war. Thousands could die, human and vampire alike, so we sacrifice the few to maybe save the many." Alara's hands clenched into fists. "That's not justice. That's cowardice." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Several vampires hissed, fangs extending. Kieran stepped in front of Alara, shielding her with his body. "She speaks from emotion, not malice. She's been through trauma tonight. She speaks truth, however rudely delivered," Lady Morgaine said, surprising everyone. "Very well. Lord Kieran, you will have 48 hours to locate any remaining captives before the Night Court convenes. Use whatever resources House Valenti can provide. But understand, if you fail, if you start a war we cannot win, the consequences will be yours to bear." Kieran bowed his head. "I understand. And the human?" another council member asked. "She knows too much. She's seen too much. Standard protocol would be she stays with me," Kieran said firmly. "Under my protection. By right of blood bond and the old laws." Lady Morgan's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "So be it. But Lord Kieran, choose carefully what you bind yourself to. Some bonds, once formed, cannot be broken without destroying both parties. I'm aware of the risks." The council dismissed them with waves of pale hands. As they left the chamber, Alara felt the weight of what had just happened settling on her shoulders. "You called me yours," she said quietly, as they walked through the stone corridors. "In front of your council, I claimed you," Kieran corrected. "It's different. It means you're under House Valenti's protection. No vampire can touch you without answering to me. And what do I answer to you for?" He stopped, turning to face her in the dim light. "Nothing. Everything. I don't know anymore." His hand rose as if to touch her face, then fell. "You should rest. There's a room prepared for you, safe, comfortable. You'll need your strength for what comes next." "What comes next?" Kieran's smile was grim. "We hunt down every last one of those bastards, and we make them pay for what they've done." Chapter 8. Shadows and Silkalar awoke to candlelight and the smell of roses. For a disorienting moment, she thought she'd dreamed it all: the warehouse, the blood, Kieran's fangs at her throat. Then she moved, and her body reminded her with a chorus of aches that every impossible thing had been real. The room Kieran had led her to was beautiful in a way that made her boarding house seem like a hovel. A canopied bed draped in midnight blue silk, walls lined with tapestries depicting scenes from myths she half remembered. A wardrobe stood open, revealing dresses that looked like they'd been tailored for her. On the nightstand, a note in elegant script: "Wear what fits. We have work to do." Shay found a dress of deep burgundy, simpler than the others, but well made, and boots that were blessedly practical. When she looked in the mirror, there was a mirror here, she noted, confirming that particular myth was false. She barely recognized herself. Her hair was wild, her eyes too bright, and at her throat, 2 small marks that would fade to nothing in a day or two. Evidence of what she'd done, what she'd given, what I chose. She corrected herself. A knock at the door. "Miss Thorne? Lord Kieran requests your presence in the archives." The vampire who escorted her through House Valenti's corridors was female, petite, with the kind of timeless beauty that made Alara feel clumsy and mortal. She introduced herself as Isabeau, turned in 1673, currently serving as House Valenti's archivist. "You're quite the scandal," Isabeau said conversationally as they walked. "It's been decades since Kieran took a blood oath, and never with a human he'd known less than a week." "It's not a blood oath," Alara protested. "Just a connection from the feeding." Isabeau's laugh was like silver bells. "Oh, darling. If you believe that, you understand nothing about our kind. Kieran doesn't form connections. He's spent 2 centuries keeping everyone at arm's length. Then you stumble into his territory, and within 3 days he's feeding from you, claiming you before the council, and looking at you like..." She trailed off, her expression thoughtful. "Well, like he's forgotten how to be alone." The archives were a cathedral of knowledge, shelves stretching 3 stories high, filled with books and scrolls and artifacts that hummed with age. Kieran stood at a massive table covered in maps and documents, his coat discarded, sleeves rolled up. He looked different in the candlelight, less like a predator and more like what he'd been before, a soldier trying to save lives. "You're awake," he said, looking up. Something flickered in his eyes, relief perhaps, or something deeper. "Good. We have 17 names from the manifest. I've been cross-referencing them with known Corvus properties, trying to determine where they might be holding the others." Alara moved to the table, studying the maps. Sarah said they were being moved out of the city. "What's beyond Ashford and Corvus territory?" "Estates, mostly. Old families that allied with Corvus decades ago." Kieran pointed to a cluster of properties north of the city. "But moving humans requires discretion. They'd need somewhere isolated. Somewhere with facilities to hold multiple captives, like the warehouse." "Exactly. Which means we're looking for industrial properties, not estates." He shuffled through papers, pulling out a different map. "There, 3 abandoned factories in Corvus territory. One used to process textiles, one was a tannery, and this one," he tapped a location near the river, "was a slaughterhouse." Alar's blood went cold. That's where they'd be, most likely. "But it's deep in Corvus territory. Walking in there would be suicide." "Then we don't walk. We plan." She leaned over the map, her mind working. "You said House Corvus is violating the covenant. That means other houses would have reason to help us, right?" "In theory. But politics, forget politics." Alara's voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. "People are dying while vampires debate procedure. What if we forced their hand? What if we gave them evidence they couldn't ignore?" Kieran studied her carefully. "What are you suggesting?" "We raid the slaughterhouse. Tonight, we document everything, take photographs, rescue any survivors, gather proof that even the night court can't dismiss." She met his gaze. "You said I earned the right to speak. Let me act too. It's too dangerous. Everything is too dangerous." She placed her hand over his on the map, feeling the cold of his skin, the faint pulse of the bond between them. "You can't do this alone, Kieran. You need help. I have House Valenti who will move only when the council permits." "You know I'm right." She squeezed his hand. "Let me help you. We stopped them once. We can do it again." For a long moment, Kieran was silent. Then slowly, he turned his hand to clasp hers, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You're going to be the death of me, Alara Thorne. Not if I can help it." His smile was small and sad and absolutely devastating. "Very well. But we do this properly. With preparation. With backup." He turned to Isabeau, who'd been watching from the doorway with unconcealed interest. "Gather the house guard. Everyone who can fight. We move at midnight." Isabeau nodded and disappeared. "Now," Kieran continued, "let me show you something." He led Alara to a locked cabinet at the archive's far end. Inside were weapons, knives, stakes, even a crossbow with bolts that gleamed silver. "If we're doing this, you need to be able to defend yourself." He handed her a knife, smaller than the one from the warehouse, but perfectly balanced. "This was made by a witch smith. The silver is blessed. It will hurt vampires badly, even ancient ones. Keep it on you at all times." Alara weighed the blade in her hand. "You're teaching me to kill your own kind. I'm teaching you to survive." His hand covered hers, guiding her grip. "Thumb here. Blade angled down. If a vampire comes at you, go for the throat or the heart. Don't hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed." They practiced until her arms ached. Kieran, correcting her stance with the patience of someone who'd trained soldiers for centuries. He moved around her like a dancer, never quite touching, but always close, his voice a steady murmur of instruction. "Better," he said finally. "You're a natural. I'm terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He stepped back, studying her. "But I see something else in you now. Something that wasn't there when we met." "What's that?" "Fire." He said it softly, almost wonderingly. "You were wounded when I found you. Broken. But you're healing, Alara. Growing stronger." She wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. He was right. The girl who'd walked through that alley 3 days ago had been a ghost, going through the motions of living without really being alive. This version of her standing in a vampire's archive, holding a blessed blade, planning a raid on a supernatural fortress, was someone different, someone who mattered. "Kieran," she said quietly, "after this is over, after we rescue the others and bring down House Corvus, what happens to us?" His expression shuddered, walls slamming down behind his eyes. "I don't know. The bond will fade. If we let it." But his voice lacked conviction. "And if we don't?" He turned away, hands gripping the table's edge hard enough to make the wood creak. Then you'd be bound to me. To this life. You'd age while I stayed frozen. You'd watch everyone you know die while I remained. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want, Alara admitted. But I know what I don't want. I don't want to go back to being invisible. To not mattering. You matter. Kieran spun to face her, and his eyes blazed silver. You matter so much it terrifies me. In 200 years, I've never let anyone close. Never let myself care. And then you appeared, bleeding in an alley, and suddenly, I can't imagine. He cut himself off, but the words hung between them, incomplete and devastating. Can't imagine what? Alara whispered, existing without you. The confession fell like a stone into still water, sending ripples through everything. Alara thought she understood. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Isabeau's voice called out, Lord Kieran, the house guard is assembled. They await your orders. Kieran stepped back, and the moment shattered. He was Lord Valenti again, controlled, commanding, untouchable. We move in 1 hour, he announced. Alara, stay close to me during the raid. No matter what happens, don't leave my side. I won't. He nodded once, then strode toward the door. But at the threshold, he paused. When this is over, he said, without turning, we'll talk about everything. Then he was gone, leaving Alara alone with her racing heart and the echo of his words, existing without you. She touched the marks on her throat, still tender, still proof of the impossible connection they'd forged. Whatever came next, rescue mission, night court, the uncertain future, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was done being invisible, done being the girl everyone pitied. She was Alara Thorne, who'd stared down vampires and survived, and tonight, she'd do it again. Chapter 9. The slaughterhouse. A minding came with fog rolling off the river, thick as wool and twice as suffocating. Alara stood in the shadows outside the abandoned slaughterhouse, surrounded by 12 vampires who moved like smoke through the darkness. Kieran was at her side, one hand resting on the hilt of his blade, the other occasionally brushing against hers, a reassurance that she wasn't alone. The building loomed before them, a monument to industrial decay. Broken windows gapped like empty eye sockets, and the smell of old blood, both animal and human, hung in the air like a curse. 4 guards on the perimeter, Isabeau murmured, appearing from the fog. All human, armed with silver-loaded crossbows. And inside? Kieran asked. At least 3 vampires, possibly more in the lower levels. She glanced at Alara. I can hear heartbeats. 5, maybe 6, some very weak. Survivors. People who'd been held here for weeks, slowly dying. We split into 3 groups, Kieran commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. Isabeau, take 4 guards and secure the perimeter. Kill quietly, we can't alert those inside. Marcus, take 3 more and clear the upper floors. I'll take the lower levels with Alara and Davian. You're bringing the human into the heart of it? Marcus, a scarred vampire with eyes like chips of ice, looked incredulous. That's madness. That's strategy. Kieran's hand found Alara's, squeezing once. She's seen their operations. She knows what to look for. And she's under my protection. Marcus muttered something in a language Alara didn't recognize, but he nodded. They moved. Alara had expected violent screams, the clash of weapons, chaos. Instead, there was only silence as House Valenti's guards killed the human sentries with brutal efficiency. Bodies dropped like puppets with cut strings, and within minutes, the perimeter was secure. The slaughterhouse doors hung open, an invitation into hell. Inside, the temperature dropped 20 degrees. The main floor was a maze of rusted equipment and hanging chains that swayed in invisible currents. Blood, old and new, stained the concrete. At the far end, a metal staircase descended into darkness. Kieran drew his blade, and it caught the moonlight filtering through broken skylights. Beside him, Davian, a massive vampire who looked like he'd been a warrior even in life, readied a crossbow loaded with silver bolts. Stay between us, Kieran told Alara. If something happens, I know. Don't hesitate. She pulled her own knife, the blessed silver warm against her palm. They descended. The lower level was worse. Cells lined the walls, most empty, but showing signs of recent occupation, chains still bolted to the floors. Buckets that had served as latrines, scratch marks on the walls where prisoners had counted days or carved desperate prayers, and in the far corner, a vampire fed. He was bent over a woman who'd stopped struggling, her skin ash pale, her eyes glassy. The vampire looked up at their approach, blood dripping from his fangs, and smiled. Lord Kieran, how unexpected. His accent was thick Eastern European, perhaps. Come to watch? House Corvus welcomes observers, though usually we charge admission. Kieran moved faster than Alar's eyes could track. One moment he was beside her. The next he had the vampire pinned against the wall by his throat. Where are the others? Kieran's voice was death itself. What others? The vampire choked out a laugh. They've been moved, sold. House Corvus has clients who pay well for fresh blood. By now, they're halfway to Kieran's blade flashed. The vampire's head separated from his shoulders, and both pieces hit the ground with wet thuds. Alara rushed to the woman, pressing her fingers to her throat. She's alive, barely. Davian, get her out. Kieran was already moving deeper into the basement. Following sounds only he could hear, they found the others in a chamber that had once been a cold storage room. 6 humans, all in various stages of starvation and blood loss. 2 were unconscious. 1 was crying softly, hopelessly. The others just stared with dead eyes. Oh God, Alara breathed. Get them out, Kieran ordered Davian. All of them, now. But before Davian could move, the lights bare bulbs strung along the ceiling blazed to life, and they weren't alone anymore. 10 vampires emerged from the shadows, led by a woman in an elegant black dress that looked obscenely out of place in the squalor. She was beautiful the way a snake was beautiful, all cold grace and lethal promise. Lord Kieran Valenti. Her voice was honey over poison. Trespassing on House Corvus territory. Murdering our associates. These are serious violations of the covenant. You're abducting and killing humans. Kieran's voice was steel. Your house violated the covenant first, Lady Morgana. We're simply enforcing it. Are you? Morgana's smile widened. Or are you using human suffering as an excuse to start a war? The Night Court will be very interested in your actions tonight. The Night Court will be more interested in your slaughterhouse, will they? Morgana gestured, and her vampires spread out, surrounding them. Because all they'll find is an abandoned building and the word of a lovesick fool who's bound himself to a human. You've grown weak, Kieran. 2 centuries alone, and the first woman who shows you kindness has you breaking every law we hold sacred. Alara felt Kieran tense beside her, felt the rage flowing through their bond like ice water. Let the humans go, he said quietly. This is between houses. They're not part of it. They stopped being not part of it the moment you involved your pet. Morgana's eyes fixed on Alara. Tell me, little human, do you know what happens to blood-bonded mortals when their vampire dies? The bond doesn't just break, it tears. I've seen it drive humans mad, leave them hollow shells begging for death. Fear stabbed through Alara's chest. You're lying. Am I? Ask him. Ask your precious Lord Valenti if I'm lying. Alara looked at Kieran. He wouldn't meet her eyes. It's true, he said finally, but only for fully formed blood oaths. What we have isn't strong enough yet, Morgana finished. But give it time. Give it another feeding or 2. And then you'll be bound so tightly that his death will destroy you both. She took a step closer. Is that what you want, human? To die, if he dies? To have your entire existence chained to a creature that will watch you age and wither while he stays forever young? Stop. Kieran's voice cracked like a whip. Why? She deserves to know what you're offering her. What you're too cowardly to explain. Morgana's smile was vicious. You want her, Kieran. I can see it. You want to turn her, make her like us, keep her forever. But you know she'll hate you for it. So instead, you're trapping her in this half-life, this pathetic bond that will kill her slowly, instead of giving her the choice to enough. The word echoed like thunder. Kieran's eyes blazed red, and power rolled off him in waves that made every vampire in the room step back, except Morgana. She held her ground, still smiling. There he is. The real Kieran Valenti. The monster under the gentleman's mask. She gestured to her guards. Kill them all. Make it look like a House Valenti raid gone wrong. The Night Court will thank us for eliminating a rogue lord. The Corvus vampires attacked. Chaos erupted. Kieran moved like death incarnate, his blade, finding throats and hearts with surgical precision. Davian's crossbow sang, silver bolts dropping vampires before they could close. But there were too many, and they kept coming. Alara grabbed the closest human, a young man who could barely stand, and dragged him toward the stairs. Can you walk? He nodded weakly. Then run. Get the others and run. House Valenti, guards are outside, they'll protect you. She turned back to the fight, knife ready, and froze. Morgana had Kieran pinned. Her hand wrapped around his throat, and she was impossibly strong. 2 other vampires held his arms, while a third raised a silver stake high. Any last words, Lord Valenti? Kieran's eyes found Alara's across the carnage, and in them, she saw everything he'd never said: regret and longing and a love he'd been too afraid to name. Alara, he whispered. Run. The stake descended, and Alara moved. She didn't think, didn't let herself feel fear. She simply ran, knife raised, and drove the blessed silver blade into Morgana's back with every ounce of strength she possessed. Morgana screamed a sound like breaking glass and dying stars. Her grip on Kieran loosened, and he surged free, grabbing the stake meant for his heart and driving it through the throat of the vampire holding it. Get her out of here. Kieran roared at Davian, but Alara wasn't leaving. Not now. Not when they were so close. She pulled her knife from Morgana's back and swung at the next vampire. At the next, her movements clumsy but desperate. The blessed silver burned them where it touched, buying Kieran precious seconds. Above them, she heard the thunder of footsteps, reinforcements arriving. Friend or foe, she couldn't tell. Then Isabeau's voice, for House Valenti. The tide turned. Within minutes it was over. The surviving Corvus vampires fled into the night, Morgana among them, wounded but alive. The humans were being carried out by Valenti guards, and Kieran stood in the center of the carnage, covered in black blood, breathing hard even though he didn't need to breathe. His eyes met Alara's, and everything else fell away. You stabbed a vampire, Lord, he said incredulously. You're welcome, Alara managed. Then her legs gave out. Kieran caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her against his chest, and she felt his heart. Did vampires have heartbeats? Racing against her ear. You magnificent, terrifying, impossible woman, he whispered into her hair. What am I going to do with you? Alara smiled despite the exhaustion, pulling her under. Chapter 10. Dawn's Promiseth Night Court convened at sunset 3 days later. Alara stood in the gallery above the ancient stone amphitheater, watching as representatives from all 4 houses assembled below. Vampires in formal attire that spanned centuries of fashion, all radiating power that made the air itself feel heavy. Kieran stood in the center circle, alone, presenting evidence to the assembled lords and ladies. The manifest, photographs from the slaughterhouse, testimony from the rescued humans who'd been questioned by neutral parties and found truthful, and through it all, Lady Morgana of House Corvus sat in her designated seat, her face a mask of cold fury, the wound in her back still healing despite 3 days having passed. The evidence is irrefutable, declared Lord Acheron of House Nightshade, his voice ancient as stone. House Corvus has violated the covenant in the most egregious manner possible. They have killed without sanction. They have trafficked in human misery. They have brought war to our doorstep. Lord Kieran also violated protocol, Morgana countered, her voice sharp. He raided Corvus territory without Night Court approval. He formed a blood bond with a human to manipulate this court's sympathies. He saved 17 humans from your torture chambers, interrupted Lady Serafini of House Meridian. He exposed corruption that reached into our city's government. He acted where we failed to act. She turned her gaze on the assembled court. The question isn't whether Lord Kieran bent rules. It's whether we have the courage to acknowledge that our rules allowed atrocity to flourish. The court erupted in argument, some supporting Corvus, others demanding justice, still others calling for compromise that would satisfy no one. Alara watched Kieran's face remain perfectly controlled, though she could feel his exhaustion through their bond. 3 days of testimony, investigation, political maneuvering. 3 days of watching humans recount horrors while vampires debated legalities. Finally, Lord Acheron raised his hand, and silence fell. House Corvus will surrender all assets acquired through human trafficking. They will pay blood price to the families of the deceased 100 gold sovereigns per victim, and they will submit to a century of monitoring by neutral parties. That's not enough, someone shouted from the gallery. Acheron's eyes flashed red. It is what the law allows. Unless House Corvus wishes to dispute the findings. Morgana stood, her movements deliberate and dignified despite her fury. House Corvus accepts the court's judgment. But let it be known we are not the only house that feeds outside the bounds of the covenant. Lord Kieran himself formed an unauthorized blood bond. If we are punished for our sins, let all sins be judged equally. Every eye turned to Kieran. The bond was freely given, he said steadily. Witnessed by my house counsel. Miss Thorne offered her blood to save my life, as is her right under the laws of consent. And have you taken her blood since? Silence. Damning, terrible silence. I have not, but you want to. Morgana's smile was poisonous. The whole court can see it. You're starving yourself, Lord Kieran. Denying the bond. It's killing you both or through the incomplete connection, you through abstinence. How noble. How tragic. Kieran said nothing. The bond is their concern, not ours, Lady Serafini interjected. Unless House Corvus wishes to argue that consensual feeding is now prohibited. I argue, Morgana said softly, that Lord Kieran's judgment is compromised, that he allowed sentiment to override duty, and that the Night Court should consider whether House Valendi requires new leadership. The amphitheater exploded into chaos. Alara didn't remember deciding to move. She simply found herself descending the gallery stairs, pushing through the crowd of vampires, who parted before her like a sea, until she stood in the center circle beside Kieran. Miss Thorne, Lord Acheron said, surprise evident in his tone. Humans are not permitted to address this court. Then change the rule, Alara said, her voice carrying despite her fear. Because I have something to say, and you're going to hear it. Kieran touched her arm. Alara, don't know. She turned to face the assembled vampires, 300 pairs of inhuman eyes fixed on her. You want to know about the bond? About whether Kieran's judgment is compromised? I'll tell you. She pulled down the collar of her dress, exposing the faint scars on her throat. I gave him my blood because he was dying. Because he'd saved my life twice, and the lives of 17 humans he'd never met. Because in 243 years, he's never forgotten what it means to be human, to value life, to feel compassion, to sacrifice for others. She met Morgana's gaze directly. You say his judgment is compromised? I say it's the only judgment here that matters. Because the rest of you debated and politicked while humans died. Kieran acted, and formed an unauthorized bond in the process. Morgana pressed. A bond I wanted, Alara said. A bond I still want. You ask if he's taken my blood since the first time? No, because he's terrified of trapping me in something I might not understand. Because he respects my humanity enough to let me choose freely, without the pressure of survival or fear. She turned back to the assembled court. You want to punish him for caring? For proving that vampires can be more than predators? Then punish me too. Because I'm not leaving. Whatever bond we have, whatever it becomes, that's our choice to make. Not yours. The amphitheater was silent as a tomb. Finally, Lady Serafini began to clap slow, deliberate applause that was quickly joined by others. Not all. Morgana sat stone-faced, and several Corvus vampires looked murderous, but enough. The human makes a compelling argument, Lord Acheron said, the faintest smile touching his lips. House Valendi's leadership stands unchallenged, and the bond between Lord Kieran and Miss Thorne is declared sanctioned by this court. Subject to the usual protocols of consent and care, he struck his staff against the stone floor 3 times. This court is adjourned. Outside the amphitheater, dawn was still 2 hours away. Kieran led Alara through empty streets, neither speaking, both processing what had just happened. Finally, in a garden behind House Valendi's sanctuary, surrounded by night-blooming flowers, Kieran stopped. You shouldn't have done that, he said quietly. I know. You've tied yourself to me in the eyes of the Night Court. The other houses will know. You'll be marked as mine. Good. He turned to face her, and his expression was anguished. Alara, you don't understand what you've committed to. The bond, if we keep feeding it, if we let it grow, you'll feel everything I feel. My hunger, my darkness, the weight of 2 centuries of death. I'm not afraid of your darkness, Kieran. I've seen mine. We match. You'll age. I won't. Every year. You'll change while I stay frozen. Until eventually I'll die, Alara finished. I know. I've always known I was mortal. At least this way. I get to spend my life mattering to someone. Being seen. Being chosen. You could have all that without me. I don't want it without you. She stepped closer, placing her hand over his silent heart. These 3 days, I've felt you pulling away. Starving yourself. Trying to weaken the bond to set me free. Stop, please. If I feed from you again, the bond will strengthen. It will become harder to break. Eventually, it will be permanent. Then make it permanent. She said it simply, certainly. I choose you, Kieran Valendi. I choose this life, this world, this impossible thing between us. Stop trying to protect me from my own choices. His hands came up to frame her face, his touch achingly gentle. You're asking me to be selfish. To keep you when I should let you go. I'm asking you to be honest. Do you want me? More than my next breath, more than blood, more than eternity itself. The words came out raw, stripped of every defense. You terrify me, Alara Thorn. In 200 years, nothing has scared me as much as how much I need you. Then keep me, she whispered. Feed the bond. Make it real. I'm not afraid. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, really looked, seeing past her humanity to the core of who she'd become. The girl who'd stabbed a vampire lord, who'd faced down the night court, who'd chosen danger and darkness and him over safety. You're either very brave or very foolish, he murmured. I'm both, Alara said, smiling. We established that. And then he kissed her. It was nothing like she'd imagined, not cold or dead, but alive with desperate longing. His mouth was cool against hers, but the emotion behind it burned. 2 centuries of loneliness, shattered by 3 days of impossible connection. When he pulled back, his eyes glowed silver in the darkness. I'll give you everything, he promised. Every night, every moment. I'll teach you our world, introduce you to our history. I'll feed from you, and only you, and I'll make sure you never regret choosing me. And when I'm old, Alara asked, when I'm gray and dying, I'll love you just as fiercely. His thumb brushed her cheek. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll offer you the choice. Mortality or eternity. Life as it is or life as I live it. But that choice is years away. For now, he tilted her chin up, exposing her throat. For now, Alara breathed. I'm yours. His fangs pierced her skin. And the world exploded into sensation, pleasure, and pain in connection so profound it felt like coming home. Through the bond, she felt everything. His relief, his joy, his absolute devotion. And beneath it all, a promise that resonated through her entire being. Mine, always mine. When he pulled away, his eyes were soft with wonder. You taste like hope, he whispered.